Alan is someone who's been there, done that. Now, Alan, you were that kind of person.
I was, Pat, yeah.
What age were you when you got into trouble?
I was arrested in my first stolen car when I was only 8 years of age.
8?
8, yeah. Behind the wheel.
And you could actually drive the car?
Well, I wasn't sure if I could drive it, but I gave it a good going anyway. You know, as clearly as I'm sitting here now, I can clearly remember it. It was an old Mark 1 Escort, an old brown one. And the minute it was outside the post office, and the minute I had an old Haldor key, and I got into it and started it up, I got into first gear. I had to look through the actual steering wheel to kind of see where I was going. And as I was driving about 200 yards down the road, the guards came out behind me. And I clearly remember a wedding car pulling off. And I somehow, don't ask me how, managed to get into second gear. And I missed the wedding car by about that much. And I ended up in the bride's front garden, through a garden railings. And it's true as only happened yesterday. I remember the guard standing at the window banging it, saying, "Get out of the car, open the door." And I said, "Read me your rights." 8 years of age.
8 years of age.
Read me your
Giving
rights.
them lip.
Yeah.
And you were in trouble then continually, pretty much?
Well, from the age of 8 up to the age of 16, I was to accumulate roughly on average between 20 to 30 previous convictions, all for unauthorised taking stolen cars.
At one point you found yourself in a room full of IRA people armed to the teeth.
That's when I was about, I say I was about 8. I was in my house. I walked down into the kitchen of my house, and there was 7 members of the IRA sitting there, cleaning their weapons and checking them and cocking them and cleaning their weapons.
At 8 you weren't drinking, I presume. When did you start?
I started drinking probably when I was around 10, 9 or 10, probably around that age, because I remember some lads had robbed the pub, and they had all these crates. I think it was Carlsberg Specials that they had, the bottles, and I remember drinking 4 of them, and I was carried home by an armed robber at that time. He would have been in his late teens, and he carried me home and says to me, "Well, Miss Croghan, we just found him like that." You know, he didn't. He actually gave me the beer, but...
what about school? Did you go to school?
I always left my house to go to school, but I never went. Do you know what I mean? I used to, get my bag out of the ditch during the course of the day full of bloodsuckers, and, after mitching. Like, it was a real truant, if you like.
And were you expelled eventually?
I was kicked out of every school I went to. And at the age of 16, then, I was kicked out of school. By the age of 14, I was no longer in school.
Was there any place they could have sent you to at that time to kind of rehabilitate you or educate you or whatever?
Not that I was aware of. Do you know what I mean? At that time I didn't care, Pat. I was just, robbing for me, like, was just getting up and, like, you get ready to come in here tonight.
Yeah. It's what you did.
Thinking. Yeah, it's what you did. You went out and you done it, and going off robbing cars every night. You just didn't get out of your bedroom window at 1 o'clock in the morning while your parents were asleep, and you just didn't think about the consequences of your actions.
When did you end up in prison?
Well, I was arrested for 2 stolen cars when I was 16 years of age. It's true, I actually flagged down the guards and admitted to these 2 cars. I said, "Listen, I was in these cars." Because I'd got off with so many crimes while I was a juvenile, I was in my preteen, like 13, 14 and 15, everybody was forming the opinion that I was a guard and informer. So in order to convince them...
You had to go to prison?
I said I had to go to prison. Plus, there was a certain element of me saying, do I really want to be doing this? And I thought maybe a little spell in prison might have thrown me to one side.
Then you robbed.
So I asked the judge to send me to prison.
When you got out, you robbed, big time?
Oh yeah, I went on the rampage. Like, I thought had me a little bit of bone fluff over my lip, and I could get served in an off licence, and I thought I was the bee's knees.
You robbed a bank?
Yeah. Armed robbery. It was the Bank of Ireland, College Green. Went in, £7,000, took out of that.
How much time did you spend in prison altogether?
From 1984 to February of 1994, I spent just under 9 years in prison altogether.
So nearly all the time in prison, basically.
Yeah.
And what was your weapon of choice when you were armed?
Well, I used to always carry a blade.
A knife?
On my person, yeah. And that was... there was many friction situations that you'd find yourself coming into throughout the criminal world, if you like, without the joyriders and stuff like that, where people would put it up to you. And I couldn't fight to save my life, Pat, so the only way I knew was taking out a blade and hitting somebody with it, and that would be the end of the fight. I'd walk away unarmed.
Yeah, but you wouldn't have been able to handle yourself if it just got down to a fight.
No, the days of using your feet and your fists are long gone,
We'll talk to you in a minute as to how you changed all that, but what made you like that? Because, I mean, this is one of the questions we're trying to answer today, why there's so much violence on the streets.
I don't know. I mean, you know, I could put it down to a combination of a number of things. Do you know what I mean? Was it the area I grew up in? Was it like the only people I palled around with, the only people I knew were criminals? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The large majority of the people that I hung around with back then are still criminals today, even career criminals, if you like. Do you know what I mean?
So it's just what kids like you did.
Yeah, it was the norm.
Were there no kids who went to school who
I'm
maybe
sure
a bit
was,
nerdy or
but
whatever?
I didn't hang around with them, you know. Like I remember, like there was a bridge that a river that ran through our housing estate, and we had to cross it every day to get to school. Every day, you know, the different factions of groups used to meet on this bridge and just mill each other, you know. We used to go up to Dublin Airport to rob cars, and we get into the lift and press to the top floor, and used to have a light in it. We'd knock the light off in pitch darkness, and then we'd punch the head off each other in the lift, and then walk into the main car park and rob a car and drive home. It was lunacy, you know. I was one of the worst little so-and-sos that got out from the face of this earth when I was a teenager, you know.
How did you turn around? Did prison do it?
No, like I couldn't. When I went into prison first, I could barely spell my own name, Pat. And when I went into prison in 1984 to start going to school in prison, for some reason that school appealed to me because it was full of my kind of people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and I used to enjoy actually going to the school. And as one of the teachers, you know, she kind of keyed in on me, and for some reason gave me that extra little bit of attention over everybody else. And I began writing, learning how to spell. She'd give me newspapers. She'd bring newspapers in from her own house at home and everything. Say, here, darling, read them and stuff like that. And she got me to write a short play. That was in 1985. I was doing 18 months at that time. And she says, I want you to enter this competition. It's a Soul Writers' Week in County Kerry, with John B. Keane, Lord rest his soul, was the judge of the competition. So I wrote a 15-minute short play, and I sent it down. Forgot all about it. A couple of weeks later, I got a letter back from John B. Keane stating that he awarded me second place in the drama section of the Soul Writers' Week. I won a cheque for £20 and a Gold Cross pen. I was over the moon.
Yeah. But, I mean, you were in jail until 1994, on and off.
Yeah.
So it obviously wasn't enough to kind of sort you out.
No, you see, like, prison was kind of like a different housing estate that I temporarily moved to from time to time. Do you know that kind of way? I'd come into the jail, and the only thing that would be on my mind is, you know, who else is in here that I know? You know, and
so it wasn't a punishment? You didn't see it as a punishment?
No, far from it. It wasn't. It was somewhere to look for. Like, once you knew you were caught, you accepted that fact, and you came to terms with it. And then the only thing that you kind of, you know, turned a negative into a positive and says, right, who's in Patrick's now that I know? Who's there now? And you look forward to getting back into the old landing that you were on before you got out the last time.
Why did it all stop in 1994?
Well, to be honest, I clearly remember it. I was sitting in my cell one night, and just someone said to me, Alan, what are you doing with your life? Where the hell are you going? You lula. You know, seriously, it's true. And I got fed up with prison. I got fed up coming in and going, hurting me ma, hurting me family, you know. And not to mention the people who I was,
abusing,
you know, robbing cars on, and, you know, okay, the people I cut up were criminals, do you know what I mean? So, like, they were the majority
they would have
of the
done the same to you.
No, yeah, they were the instigators, and anyway, in the majority of cases, do you know what I mean? But I'm talking about, like, the cars I was robbing. I was thinking about them. Like, everything you do touched others, and I started to really think about this. You know, touched others, not even me or my family, but other people that I was.
And that began.
Yeah, I just didn't want prison anymore.
Does it take that? Does it take getting browned off with it? I mean, when we hear from Alma what's happening to her, and Angela says a different kind of gurrier out there nowadays, does it take that they have to go through it, they have to get browned off with it before they give it up, or is there anything that...
There's a flip side to that coin, Pat. There is a certain element out there that I can see growing up today. Like, if you're lucky, if you have 10 kids standing on a street corner, I guarantee you, if you've got at least 6 of them on a one-to-one basis, he is, you know, redeemable. You can get him away. You can talk him, if you give him an alternative, you can get him away from the life of crime. But then you have the other 4 who are subconsciously, you know, grooming themselves as career criminals and will grow to be the next John Gilligan or the next Martin Cahl.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And they will.
But there are some who are out there to be saved.
But there is, without a shadow of a doubt. But because of that 6 who will look up to these other 4, if you like, I'm just using this as a broad figure, if you like, who look up to these other 4, they try to live up to them. Do you know what I mean? If they're out stabbing people or attacking people in unprovoked attacks. And it's great what the First Lady was saying there about her son who was down in Cork. Like, there is, you know, they're totally fearless about attacking people. Like, and these are only kids, you know, might I add. Like, they're not adults. They're only like 14, 15 and 16 and 17. You know.
All right, Sarah, you're a solicitor who represents child and juvenile criminals. I mean, what is your analysis? I mean, are you dealing with hopeless cases by the time they're 13 or 14?
Well, I think that's probably the problem. It does seem a bit hopeless by the time they come to the Children's Court, but I think the essential point, what we're dealing with here, and you have to start at that, is poverty. And you will find that over 90% of the children who go through the Children's Court come from impoverished backgrounds, and I think until the government really starts to deal with that in a serious fashion, then they are never ever going to deal with the whole issue of crime. It will always be firefighting stuff. And I think if we even just look at the kind of priority that the government gives to children, if we look at the fact that the Minister for Children is actually only a Minister for State, he doesn't have a seat in the Cabinet, and that shows the kind of priority we are giving to children. And if we were perhaps to look at one of the predecessors, Frank Fahy, who then was promoted to Minister of the Marine, he does have the seat of the Cabinet. So, in effect, what does
fish
that say
are more
about
important
it? Exactly,
than children.
that's what our society is saying. That's what we're saying. Our fish are more important than our children. And I think that reflects what our government...
It's a travesty to say that just because you're poor, you're going to be a criminal. There are lots of people out there who don't...
that's not what I'm saying at all, Pat. No. No, I'm not saying that poor people are all criminals. What I'm saying is that the vast majority of children who become involved in crime are from poor backgrounds. It's a very different thing than saying that all people who come from poor backgrounds are involved in crime. They're two different things.
But, you know, there are a lot of people struggling to make ends meet, who want their kids to be law-abiding, who send them to school.
It's incredibly difficult, particularly if you're trying to bring your children up in estates where there are absolutely no services, where the services for the schools are absolutely appalling. They brought in new school attendance legislation recently, and what you were talking about there, truancy, Alan. They brought in new school attendance. They're now called education and welfare officers. They looked for 25 million last year for funding. They got just over 5 million. So they got what we decided the Spire was worth in O'Connell Street. That's what the government feels our children are worth. And basically, what you say is like you went into St Patrick's, so you would have been 16 and you could hardly read.
Yeah.
We have the highest level of functional illiteracy in the EU, and that is obscene given the wealth that this country has. I mean, to say that you went through mainstream education and that nobody picked up on the fact...
because I didn't, like, I just didn't bother going to school.
No, but that wasn't picked up on until the first time you got help. To say that children actually have to become criminalised before they get help, what does that say about our society?
You said you hurt your ma, and you were very sorry for what you continually did by going to jail and all the rest of it.
You know, like, at the end of the day, like, my mother went out to work as a waitress, do you know what I mean? She worked shift work and everything. She worked, like, the only breadwinner in the house, went out to work, clothed us, feed us, done everything. Like, my mother never, she would never raise a hand to me, you know, and she would just sit me down and give me the bars of Armagh. In other words, give me a massive 2-hour lecture when I was arrested by the guards or whatever.
But it didn't work.
No, it didn't. It didn't work. Do you know what I mean? Like, and at the same token, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't...
But it's not your ma's fault, that's the point.
No, my ma tried her best, and I don't agree with, you know, there's been recent reports out there, Pat, where people are saying hold the parents responsible. You can't, because a large majority of the parents love their kids. It's unconditional. Do you know what I mean? You love your kids, and I know a parent would do anything to try and get their child away from a life of crime. If they thought there was any way possible.
I would definitely agree with that, because a lot of people say, do these children's parents not care about them? I've yet to come across parents who don't care about their children. The difficulty is, and would say in the position there your mother found herself in, what we need is people at the community level who are there to assist family, to have perhaps some kind of home help, to have services there, to have more programmes after school.
But we get reports from the Children's Court, and it will describe that the mother broke down in tears as her son was given 2 years or whatever. But the son doesn't, you know, change his ways. He sees his ma absolutely deeply distressed. And yet he goes out and does it again.
You're talking about a child who has become so entrenched in antisocial behaviour by the time he comes to the Children's Court that seeing his mother crying, he's seen her crying plenty of times, I'm sure, before that, is not going to change. It's often too late at that stage, unless you start at an earlier stage. These children can be seen at school age, at the age of 4 and 5 when they start to drop out of school, unless you pick up on it at that stage with proper school attendance, with proper attendance by social workers, an entire multidisciplinary team working with those kids. Then at 13 or 14 it's often too late.
John Murray, you're a retired guard at this stage. You take a kind of a different view on this.
I do, because I feel that just because you come from a certain area is neither an excuse nor a reason why you should be involved in crime. And that's, you know, to go down that road is demeaning to the vast majority of people from that area who are law-abiding and try to do the best they can. But everybody is beating about the bush and not really confronting the issue. I know that people are genuinely doing their best.
All right, what would you do?
Well, what I would do for a kick-off, Pat, I would have to break this cycle of violence. For example, the numbers are actually quite small. They're not as, there aren't whole areas where all the kids are bad. But I watched the primetime program there around last November, December, where a study was done of the teenage crime situation in the greater Dublin area. And an amazing statistic cropped up at the end of that program, and what it was that the bulk of the damage and the hardcore of the young criminals amounted to no more than 60 people.
What, for Dublin?
For the greater Dublin area. This
60?
60, the bulk of the crime.
So what would you do with the 60?
Well, I worked one time, Pat, as a bus conductor. I fit 60 people on a double-decker bus. And we have a government that is not really confronting the issue because everybody wants to be popular. Nobody wants to say the unpopular thing. And the 60 people, for the sake of themselves, to safeguard themselves, and for the sake of the next generation that's using them as role models, they have to be taken out of circulation.
And where would you put them?
By legal means. Where
would you put them?
How do you take them out of circulation first?
Take them out of circulation this way. What we're doing at the moment, we're exporting the problem. We're saying, and it's a common complaint that you hear in court every day, the judge will tell you that he can't send this child away, a 14-year-old, because there's no suitable place of detention, no secure unit in Ireland for this child.
But what are you talking about? Are you talking about something like Borstal?
Well, not necessarily. What I'm talking about is a disciplined environment where these young people will have to conform to some sort of a program that they can't just walk in and out.
That has been tried and tested.
No,
and
are you talking about boot camp or Borstal?
No, it hasn't.
It has been tried and tested and failed. And every time that something would say, joyriding came out in the set, people talk about it as if it's something new. It's not something new. It came out, it was very, very common in the 70s. In 1978, they opened Lock in the House in Cavan to try and respond to that. They then transferred it to Oberstown and Trinity House. Now they have St. Patrick's. In the 80s, then they opened Spike Island. So all of the time, the government has responded with a heavy hand.
Sarah,
it has never worked.
What we heard from Alan is that it was like moving to another housing estate temporarily. See which of his mates were in there.
But is that not a reflection on the housing estate that Alan came from, rather than a reflection of the prison he was in?
It wasn't a deterrent to you, was it?
No, it didn't work.
But why are we looking? Why does it have to always be deterrent? Should we not be looking at prevention? Should we not be looking at the start of the conveyor belt, and not when the child falls off the conveyor belt?
The problem is, Sarah, that you have to set boundaries for young people. People have to know how far they can go and how far they cannot go. And if they go beyond the boundary, there's no point in saying, you know, okay, you're free.
But why are we not looking at why are they pushing out these boundaries? Why aren't we going that
because
far?
We're not.
Why do we always have to look at the here and the now and solving this within the next 6 months? Why not look at long term?
We're a bunch of hypocrites basically in this country. And for example, you take the group of 60 people, and they are the hardcore that's causing all the trouble up around in the Dublin area. Now, some time after that programme being broadcast, I was watching Michael Smith, Minister for Defence, was being interviewed on television, and he was being asked basically about the purchase of the new government jet. And the bottom line, and the reason he gave for purchasing the jet at the end of the day was, we can do it because we're a multi-billion euro economy. And what I'm saying is, we're a multi-billion euro economy, and we can't cope with 60 kids that are running riot and holding Dublin City up to
two things. One, take the 60 kids in, they'll be replaced by 60 other kids.
They will, John.
We've never actually tried it.
John, of course they will.
There was, as true as I'm sitting here talking to you, there was
Alan,
groups that I hung around with. There was groups that I hung around with. They moved on over to the 70s, who were kind of 2 or 3 years my senior, even 4 or 5. And I kind of looked up to them, and I actually went out and tried to better them. And when they got banged up, I stepped onto the
they're your role models, you see. Those other people.
They were the only people that I hung around with.
Quick one for you, Alan, again. Would deterrence work? If prison was a tough place where you didn't get the best of food, you didn't get your telly, you were marched up and down, you had to do hard labour, would it work? Would it have deterred you?
I don't think so. like, when I first went into St. Patrick's, Pat, like, the first night I was in St. Patrick's, I cried my eyes out. You know, I actually prayed. I was only 16 years of age. I prayed to God in heaven and everything, saying, please, God in heaven, let me out of jail, and I promise you I'll never rob again. I don't know if I never would, but I had so much fear instilled in me on that night that there's always the opportunity for the sharp shock treatments that may or may not have worked.
Alan, by the time you got to St. Patrick's, it was already too late.
All right.
No, I don't
Dr.
believe
Brendan Dooley, who's a psychiatrist working with juveniles, what is the problem here? I mean, are kids different to the way they were? Are they drinking too much? Is there less parental control?
Well, Pat, I think Alan's story, illustrates many of the antecedent problems, because if you're looking at children who are going to come before the courts, really the major determinant is the length that they've had the problem. So the younger they start, the more likely they're going to come before the court.
Are you saying that we're actually too soft and liberal with the younger kids, that we leave it too long before they actually get the frighteners put on them, by which time they're so hardened that the judge and the guards don't frighten them?
Well, what you have to look at is you have to look at the child, you have to look at the family, you have to look at education, and you have to look at the wider community, and take all of these aspects into account, and not really look at apportioning blame, but kind of understanding the genesis of the problem and looking at, you know, where intervention is effective. And if you're looking, for example, at the individual child, you know, from a very early age, you're looking at the characteristics of the child. Children who have conduct problems are more likely to go on to develop.
But hang on,
get
we're
involved
talking
in
about
crime.
some homes where the parents are just bad parents, indifferent to their kids. And you're really talking about people being interested in educated.
The vast majority of parents are not indifferent to their kids. I think that's a very unfair thing to say.
And
I think Alan, speaking of his mother, is the kind.
No, but listening to Brendan there,
he's talking
about someone isolating that their kid has a problem. A lot of parents don't know their kids have problems. They don't recognise illiteracy when it's already present in a young school kid.
Because the services aren't there. Because there is such a huge shortage of child psychologists in this country if you want to have your child assessed. And that's often the problem. Children end up being criminalised, and that's the very first time they get out. I had a child last week who had to be remanded in custody to Mountjoy Prison to get a psychiatric assessment, even though she had no previous convictions. The week before, another 17-year-old lad who was remanded in custody to Clover Hill Prison to get... And that is what has to happen. Gardaí often end up charging children just to get them help because there's nothing there in the open community.
All right, Michael Dundee. Where's Michael Dundee? Yeah, Michael, from the Tipperary Star. There is an alternative to the policing methods we see at work in Dublin City. What's the alternative in Thurles?
Well, in Thurles, Pat, the local town council has appointed an investigation officer. There's actually a tenants liaison investigation officer who will work with the people in the estates where there are difficulties. It has a very broad base brief, but part of the brief, the main part of the brief would be dealing with tenants' complaints, the ordinary kind of tenancy stuff. But there would also, in the context of what you're talking about tonight, this person would assist in trying to weed out the troublemakers, identify the troublemakers, and where the council would need to bring cases to court, this person would prepare evidence and assist the council and the Gardaí, if you like, in coming.
So why can't the guards do that? Why does it take this kind of enforcer?
Well, obviously the guards can do it as well, but you would have a situation where somebody who would be working in liaison with the Residents Association would probably be closer to them than maybe the Gardaí would. Now, the Gardaí and Thurles are very good, I'd have to say, and I'd also have to say that Thurles doesn't have a serious problem. It would be a minority problem, much the same as what the other people said.
Okay, we're going back really to, you know, how much control people can have over their own destinies. Could anyone have stopped you in your estate?
No, because I wanted to do what I wanted to do, despite.
But if someone had dragged you along to a psychiatrist like Brendan, had you assessed, would that have made any difference to you?
I don't see, when I was growing up, Pat, like, if a guard came up to me, the defence shields went up. Do you know what I mean? Even a school teacher, anybody to do with authority, you kind of rebelled against them. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I'm just trying to get a handle on, I mean, the multidisciplinary approach which Sarah recommends, where everybody's brought to bear on someone like you, because you were that soldier. would it have made any difference? You know, truancy officer, social worker.
Well, that's a $50 million question, Pat. Like, nobody ever
They
actually
weren't there.
approached me when I was and says, listen, Alan, come here, let's have a little...
And what about the
Alan,
heavy?
in fairness, I think you made it in spite of the system, not because of the system.
Yeah, well,
I
it was
think
down to me.
It was down to you.
No,
Down to you at the end. What about the heavy hand that John is recommending?
Well, I'll give you a quick example. Right? If parents, even chastise their kids or whatever, like for every time they break... There's a guy that I hung around with, Pat. Right? His father used to strip him naked, tie him to the telegraph pole and whip him in front of everybody for the whole road to see every time he got into trouble. That guy now is in his late 30s, very early 40s. He is HIV positive and he's still currently involved in crime, serious crime. And he just went massively downhill. Do you know what I mean? So I think parents initiating strict control, and whipping kids or beating kids up or chastising them has totally gone out the window. And even today, though, when I see the younger generation growing up, Pat, the 13 and 14, even girls as well, especially girls, they'll stand up to their parents. And when the parents try to reprimand them, you go and do that. No, why? What are you going to do? I'll give you a clip around the ear, yeah, and I'll get you charged. And if you have a 13 or 14-year-old kid who picks up the phone and says to a guard, by the way, my dad's have to give me a clue, I want to get him charged. Believe you me, that'll be investigated, and the father find himself being prosecuted because he tries to reprimand the child.
How do you feel in town these days? Do you feel scared?
Honestly, yeah. And
you're a hard man.
It was only a couple of years ago. I'd say about 3 years ago. I was walking through Darndale with a girlfriend that I was going out with at the time, and out of nowhere, these 5 guys with bars and cavity blocks started hopping them off my head and hit me across. I even had a big scar, there's 7 stitches in the crown of my head from the iron bar. Absolutely, I pushed my girlfriend and told her to run. Do you know what I mean? And I'd run for one guy, and these were only like up to my chest and height. And I'd run for one guy, and the other guy behind me would get a cavity block and throw it at me and hit me in the back of the head. I'd turn to go and grab him, and somebody else would be hitting me with something. I just ended up falling on the ground and trying to get away, and they ran off. Thank God,
Is it worse than it was?
Kids now today have no fear, and that's how bad it's getting. I'd say, I wouldn't say the majority of them have no fear. There's a lot of kids out there who are mixed in with these groups, who can be got to on a one-to-one basis. And I think you need people, do you know what I mean, who know the system, who've been to approach them.
Just Brendan there, the psychiatrist who's professionally trained to understand these kids. I mean, what would the kids' attitude to Brendan be?
That he doesn't know, he doesn't have a clue.
No, I don't mean to besmirch your reputation at all, Brendan, but that you don't speak the language. And a lot of the people, not just you, but a lot of the multidisciplinary people that the kids are going to come in contact with don't speak the language.
I think you have to look at it, in a sense, the etiology of what gives rise to kind of these behavioural conduct problems, kids getting into trouble. There's many factors involved. You have to look at the child themselves, you have to look at family factors, in a sense, helping, supporting families. As you've said earlier, it's about parents not being able to effectively kind of discipline their children and resorting to methods that are not effective and counterproductive. It's about keeping children in education, picking up the particular problems that they have, picking up problems such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is in itself a risk factor.
All right, John, what do you say to all of this?
Alan hit the nail on the head there, basically, when he said we don't have a clue. We're all running around like headless chickens. Just one incident, Pat, that sums it all up for me. Sometime before Christmas, you had an incident down the country of gang rape at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Right? You had... I can't discuss the case maybe in detail because it's sub judice or whatever, but one of the people involved, or allegedly involved, and that was arrested in that case, was 14 years of age. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he was able to be out driving in a stolen car, engaging in gang rape. 2 days before that, he was in court, and the judge had to release him because there was no suitable place to detain him.
We have a lot to do.
Right.
We have a lot to do.
We haven't a clue.
We have to leave it there. Thank you, Brendan and John and Sarah and Alan. Thank you.
I'd like to add for the record, though, I have subsequently went on to become a journalist, and I've completely turned my life around. That point wasn't made.
All right. Well done, Alan. Well done. Okay, that's the end of this part. Don't go away. We'll be back in a couple of minutes' time.